And in 1973, on Good Friday, the committee organised a working bee, and to this day we still have working bees on Good Friday. But on this particular Good Friday, 1973, they slapped together what is called the Tin Shed. Now there's a photo, as you go through the photos here on the screen, you will see a photo of the Tin Shed drinking team. Undefeated premiers. And the Tin Shed consisted, and it's unfortunate we don't have a photograph of it. Well, if you've got one, I'd like to see it. But the Tin Shed consisted of 4 walls and a roof. There was no floor. The floor consisted of used conveyor belts from ICI. For a number of years, the Tin Shed was the social rooms for the football club. And we used to change in there, and we also used the marching girls facility, which was on the same reserve, at Kindersmith Reserve, which is no longer there also because the basketball stadium is there. So a significant issue, the Tin Shed and the burning down of the rooms.
Tell us, back in what was your training regime in the 70s? So I'm sure that the players of the modern day would be interested to know exactly how hard you fearsome beasts of the 70s, with your fearsome reputation of being these tough blokes from the 70s, exactly what you put in on the track.
I'll answer that.
No, I want to answer that.
You both answer.
We had I do recall one of our coaches, and that was Ned Brewis. And Ned, he only knew one thing, and that was circle work, push-ups and laps. So you do laps, then you do push-ups, then you do circle work, then you do laps, then you do push-ups, and more laps, more push-ups. Well, I reckon we did more push-ups than anybody else.
Absolutely.
And one thing I can recall is that we had no lights because the rooms had been burnt down, so we had no lights. And we used to train in Churchill Avenue, in front of St John's College, in the median strip, under the street lights. That was our lights. We did it tough in those days.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Back in my time, he says. What about the social side of the club in the 70s? Was it? I mean, because got a fair reputation now as being a very good social club. How was it, given you only had the Tin Shed to drink in?
We were fortunate that in the 70s, I think it might have been 1971, there was a Yarraville YCW folded, and a number of players came over from Yarraville YCW and played with us. And I can think of Peter Grigg, Johnny Casser, Peter Casser,
Tough boys.
Billy Stevenson, whole lot of them. And I remember the social functions in the Marching Girls Hall, and it was not much more than a shed. It was pretty basic, but yeah, the social functions. We've always had good social functions with this club, no matter what, whether we had facilities or not. We'd go elsewhere and organise good social functions. So, social functions always well attended, still are today, well attended, as you can see by tonight.
And the other one I wanted to ask was, the pay scale back in the 1970s, in that early part of the 1970s. What frighteningly large amount of money were you on per game, Michael?
Forget Sunbury. As far as I can remember,
You got heaps.
no, I did not get heaps.
Got heaps.
I do recall I did go away for 2 years and play somewhere else, and
How much for
and when I came back, Dave Thurwell was the president at the time, and he did offer me money, and I said no. I'll play. That was 1976, so I personally don't think anybody was getting paid in 1976.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's good. That's Michael's new nickname now is Pinocchio. Michael, I'll leave that part of it and we'll move on to Greg to move into the mid part of the 70s and specifically, I guess, the next significant event was 1976.
Thank you, Kevin. Absolutely. Let me tell you, 1976 was a pretty special year. I'd been at Sunshine YCW for 12 months prior to that, and I will say about the training regime before I go into that is that on my first night of training, which was pre-season in 75, I'm a raw kid that's come from the bush. I've come down and I've been brought down by Dick Hume to come and play, and I've been introduced to the coach, Ray Kavanagh. And Ray says, come along and come and play. And Ray was a fantastic player. For those of you that haven't met Ray, please make yourself known to him. He captained Victoria in the YCW competition. He was an A-grade best and fairest. He was captain of the premiership team in 76, and he's about Robbie Menzies' height, and he played in the ruck. But we trained with Ray, and we did this 2-on-2 drill with Ray and we were doing it with Mick Laffin and Phil Shine, who were captain, coach and vice captain of the reserves. And we happened to tackle Phil Shine, and he said, listen, son, he said, this is training. We do not go hard at training. But in 76, Michael talks about 76. Michael was a key player in 76 because he was the centreman. And we had a fantastic side, and I've been warned by a few blokes that if I don't mention them, they're going to come and sit on my table and annoy me. But we, 2 weeks before the finals, we happened to play West Heidelberg, out at West Heidelberg, and we absolutely got slaughtered, both on the ground and by Mr. Russo as the umpire. We got towed up by about 14 goals. We happened to finish in the top 2. We went on to beat West Preston, I think, in the second semi-final, quite convincingly. West Heidelberg won their way into the grand final. We travelled out to Heidelberg, and the thing was that we did an enormous amount of travelling. We used to play at Heidelberg, Reservoir, Thomastown, Faulkner, Clifton Hill. We did an enormous amount of travelling. Clifton Hill, if you ran near the boundary, the ladies would hit you with their umbrellas over the fence. Against West Heidelberg in the grand final, we got off to a pretty good start. We had the game pretty well in control by about half-time. Peter McEnany had a shot for goal right on the siren from about 30 metres out, which is about Peter's distance. He didn't quite make the distance. Johnny Hitch tried to shepherd the ball through, took out 2 blokes while he tried to do it. And all, you blokes had a little bit of a scuffle with Bruno down in the goal square late today. That was nothing. The brawl that ensued at half-time continued from the goal square to the race, which was about just outside the 50. And Jeff McEnany cleared it as he cleared through the pack, took out 2 or 3 blokes as he went through, left the ground, and if you blokes have a look at the premiership photo on the wall, you'll see that Jeff has his arm in plaster wrapped up, and that was from breaking it whilst playing off at half-time going off the ground. And the other one with his arm in plaster in that one is Michael Hayes, who did it on the Monday, celebrating through the window at the front door of the Braybrook Hotel.
Now, wasn't there some controversy about the fact that you were so well in front in the grand final, and those were the days of the 19th and 20th men?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, wasn't there some controversy surrounding that?
A lot of controversy around this because I happened to ask the question today. I was trying to work out who had kicked all of the goals, and I happen to know that Peter Cullen kicked 5. We only kicked 14. I think Peter McEnany kicked 2. I think Johnny Hitch kicked 3. And I was struggling to come to grips with who else kicked goals, and so I decided I'd ask a few blokes. And I got tipped that Lenny Croft might know how many goals were kicked that day. So I decided to go and ask Lenny. He said, don't ask me. How many did you kick, Lenny? He says, Netta Brewers didn't give me a run. He was 19th man. And Netta, he hates you with a passion. But 19th man and 20th man did not get a run all day.
And as I check my careful research here, 14,993 to 8,553, you were never in any danger of losing the bloody game. Why didn't he get a run?
That is the way that it happened back then. During that year, I happened to hurt an ankle and missed 3 weeks with a severe ankle strain, and I convinced Netta that I got out of plaster on the Tuesday and decided that I was ready to play. Netta said, no, you're not. So I trained on the Thursday and hobbled around and managed to get through, and Netta said, well, okay, you can play. So he put me on the bench, and there I sat all day.
Just in sort of finishing the 70s, the great characters of the 70s around the club. You might have a friend.
There are, let me tell you, there are some outstanding individuals through the 70s. People from all walks of life who've done some enormous things for the club during that period of time. From the playing side, you've got the absolute larrikins like Russell Higgs and Shane Turley, and then you've got the absolute pests like Mick Hayes, who would give you heart punches at 10:15 at night after 44 beers just to see if you were fit. There are people that the club could never ever live without. People like Raymond Villa, who was and is the heart and soul of the place. His name's on the front of the pavilion. Back when the new rooms were built and opened in '75, and I didn't have the fortune of playing in the tin shed, those rooms, as you see them now, finished where the pillars are in the middle of the rooms. So the bar was up the other end next to the canteen. We changed in both of those rooms and had a concertina door across the middle. The concertina door was pushed away after the game so all of the ladies could then come inside and we could have a drink amongst the sweat and mud and slush and everything else. And the ground wasn't in as good a condition as it is now. Ray Villa, who organised through negotiations with council and everything else, eventually got the rooms extended out the front and was an absolute driving force. He was on the committee from 65 to 85. He was president for about 13 years. He absolutely drove the place forward. He did some fantastic stuff for the club. He made Sunshine what it is today, along with the original people in the 60s and Peter Evans, and then those that followed him absolutely took it forward. So Ray Villa has an absolute outstanding performance for this club. And then you've got all of the families that come through, like the Hayeses and the Hayeses and the Hayeses and the Carrolls and the Carrolls and the Crofts and whoever else, right? And the Connors and the Laffins. You know, I'll never forget in the early days, Marge Laffin being there as large as life as she is today, a little bit more sprightly than what she is today, but she was an absolute trooper way back then. We used to have our social functions in the Mariana receptions, which were bring your own grog. So everybody turned up with eskies, with ice and everywhere, and it flowed everywhere. We had the presentation days generally involved the footballer's gift, which you have on the ground now, but they were held at places like Macedon, they were held at Bacchus Marsh, they were held all over the place. And we had some fantastic players, and if you care to have a look at the side that's played in the '76 grand final, it had quality players across every line. You know, you'll never forget Mick Huxwell, who absolutely dominated at fullback. Nothing got past him. You know, clear memory is him sitting on some bloke's shoulders in the goal square and just hovered there and waited until the ball arrived. You know, he just commanded his presence, and you got big John Hitch, the policeman at full forward, who just ruled the goal square and ruled the forward line as though it was his own. And it was just a fantastic place to be. And you guys that are playing now, you have an enormous legacy to uphold and continue. This club has been around for a long time. It is going to be around for a long time further, and may all the good fortune be with you.
And just to finish off, Michael, tell us about the big pavilion that was built in 75.
Yes, after the rooms got burnt down in 70, it took 5 years before the Sunshine Council decided to let the tender, and we finally moved into the rooms in 1975. At that stage, we had 3 teams in the open age playing in the YCW. We had the under-15s and under-17s playing in the YCW, and the committee took a decision to move to the FDL in 1975, so we had our under-11s and under-13s playing in the FDL in 1975. Cost of the new building, a staggering $44,000 in 1975. You wouldn't build much for $44,000 these days, but that's what it cost, $44,000. And before I finish, I would like to make comment about the women in the club. There are, over the years, in 50 years, there has been an awful lot of women that have contributed so much to the betterment of the club. And many people who have been around for a long time will know who I'm talking about, but there are also a lot of people, a lot of women who don't get the accolades, that have been around, have been doing things behind the scenes, working in the canteen, doing all sorts of jobs around the club. I remember in the days, in the 70s, the women of the club had to provide a casserole or something, a meal, on a Saturday night. Now those days have gone, but that's the sort of thing that happened. So what I'm saying is we greatly appreciate the work that the women did in the club.
Put your hands together, everyone, for Michael and Greg. Fantastic effort there. I think that'd be perfect for next year's Ladies' Day, don't you think? Ladies, bring a casserole. Bring a casserole, a karaoke tape and a UDL. What more do you want? Let's move to the 80s. And to talk to you about the 80s, a life member of the club, man who was on the committee from 1962 to 1990. That's a bloody long time as the treasurer. Also another life member, former president of the club and a former BNF of the reserves. Please welcome Peter Evans and Michael Laffin to talk about the 80s.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Peter and I have the pleasure of walking you through the history of the 80s, and certainly in capturing the information of the 80s, we couldn't help but feel, we both felt very strong. It was a very exciting decade of progress for our club. And may we begin. In 1980, in the early 80s, the committee identified areas of our club that needed attention. Our facilities, our ground, and our finances. These areas were critical to our long-term success going forward, both on and off the field. Some of this has been covered, but we'll just proceed if you don't mind. Having our original rooms burnt to the ground in 1970, a standard pavilion took its place. The rooms doubled as a change and social room, as mentioned by Michael, with a concertina door curtain separating the teams. Everybody stood outside until after the game, where the players all changed, and this was very uncomfortable, particularly for our women and children, and it wasn't acceptable. So it needed improvement. Our ground which was full of foundry steel that came with the loads of stand that were put on the oval in 1962 when we moved there. Many here tonight will remember the cuts on the legs and arms and being knee-deep in mud, or was it sand? We had some great ideas, but they needed to be financed and they needed to be planned. So we set about forming the Sunshine YCW Building Cooperative. It was formed between the two co-tenants, the football and the cricket club. Members took out shares and became guarantors for the loans we took out against the bank. The loan was $30,000 and took 10 years to repay with careful budgeting. Change rooms for both home and away sides were built with separate umpire and medical rooms. This quickly improved our situation, with all people having access to our social rooms straight after the game. It was a big step forward. However, the club was keen to progress its building program further, but more funds were needed. Through some good timing or forward thinking, we became involved in bingo at the Western Suburbs Bingo Centre. Bingo gave us a medium that would in time bring in some serious money. Special mention should be made to all the club volunteers we had to run bingo every Tuesday night. That year, 1980, we won the Under-17 Premiership in the FDL, our first one, coached by Gary Nightingale. Our senior coach that year was Mel McIntyre.
(1981), things settled down building-wise. We did manage, however, to install floodlights around the ground at the club cost. That year we fielded 3 senior sides and 4 junior sides. A big number of 237 players played with the club that year. Kevin mentioned the pay scale a short while ago. Interestingly, I can tell you that in 1981 we spent $10,000 on coaching and player awards. Aside from that, we put to one side $15,000 towards future building programs. On the field, we won our first ever reserve grade premiership, the team coached by Tony Slopak. Our senior coach that year was Tony Boyd.